Mm. Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. I hope you brought your coffee this time, or a cold one. Anyway, I'm going to talk about my miter saw, and today let's talk about the basic foundation of my miter saw. So I'm going to take some of these attachments off out of the way that we're probably not even going to use. I'll explain about this thing today and the stop block, but we'll wait. I'm going to make this its own episode, but I'm going to do one on the anchor jig and how to use it on here. I'll show you some tricks. So we'll do that on its own video all by itself. So that's going to be a second video that we're going to do about this whole system. I'm going to pull the pin out just so it's out of my way. And this is actually it's a pretty good system, I think. And this is the key to the whole system right here, as far as I'm concerned, is the fence itself. Now, it's a very simple. I put two pieces of 2x4 together, and then I milled it down to exactly a 2 5/8 on all surfaces. Perfectly square. I made mine 32 inches long. I actually am thinking about making another one and making it 48 inches long, and I could use one or the other depending on what I'm doing. It would be nice because all the accessories will work on any of these as long as I make them the same way. Again, this is the foundation. I could have made this out of, I could have bought a piece of aluminum and done something like this because that's out there, but I don't like the aluminum because you're going to be times when I'm going to want to cut through here. Like if I raise my blade up and I tilt it to a special angle for a special project, I can just pick out any spot I want, use that, and then write down what that angle is on here, and I can always use it from that point forward. And I can move it around as I need to for different types of things. When you make this yourself, chances are you are going to use this in one position 99 times out of 100. And most of the time, you're just going to have it set up like that. Just like when you pull up your sled and you throw a sled up here, it's always the same to begin with. So this will actually be in one position most of the time. What I like about this that you can't do with the table saw sled is that if I need to for something strange that I'm doing, and I need to take and put it over here instead and do it, I can easily switch it. And I can do everything I do over here, I can do from this side. Also, I can do it on my other table saw, my dado stack table saw. I can use this over there, just like I can here. So, you also are not tied down to a single miter. If you want to have more than one for different places or different things you're doing. Because you can use this thing. There's no reason why I couldn't take this over to the bandsaw using the miter slot on my bandsaw table and using this whole setup on the bandsaw if I wanted to. So it's very versatile, and if I have another miter gauge over there, as long as I can attach this with 2 bolts, you can do that. So let's talk about this for just a second. Then I'll get more into this thing here, and we'll talk about how to really build it. First thing to remember is that you can use any miter gauge you want. I showed you my Incra gauge. It's an Incra 1000, but I also had this one. This one here is the one that came with the saw when I bought it used. And it might be the original even. I don't know. I really haven't been able to tell. It says Rockwell, so I suspect it is the original. And this is really a nice, heavy miter gauge. It already had the low profile on it. It has the 3 critical stops. When you're working on your table saw, 99 times out of 100, probably even more than that, you're going to have one of 3 settings that when you're doing cross cutting. It's either going to be at 90, it's going to be at 45 one way or the other. Yes, we do others, but those are your main things. So I really like to have the stops on those 3 points so that I can move this easily to do that. Both of these can do that. The big difference between these two, this one is definitely cheaper made, but the holes, these slots that I used, make it really easy for these. I am going to have to take this one and modify it because there is not that on the front plate. And I'm going to have to drill 2 holes in it so that I can put T-bolts in here. But those won't be able to be lifted on and off. But I'll still be able to take and put this on from the end and slide my piece on there if I need to. So I can still take the pieces on and off easily. I like the slots. They're not critical. But that's just what this one was. And that's why I probably used this one to begin with as I was making this instead of this one. It's because I don't have to modify this. And I've been using it because of this ease of being able to attach things to it. So, but this one I think is I'm going to go back to. I'm going to get it cleaned up probably first. Make it look nice. And then I'm going to probably go back to using this one. Because I really like this one a lot better than this one. It just feels better. Anyway, it doesn't matter what one you use. You could even, like I said, use the one that is the Inca 1000. Then all you have to do is just make yourself a small plate. This would be too tall. A plate that's the same height as your fence. Attach it to it. Have 2 holes drilled in it so you can put your T-bolts in there. And you'd have the same thing you have here. Or you could even put slots on it so you could drop it down on it. You can make a plate, attach it permanently, and then your miter saw would be good to go. So, anyway, the miter saw, the miter gauge is very important. Make sure you have a good one that you're comfortable with and that you're confident that when you want to cut a 90-degree angle, you can lock it down to 90 degrees and you're going to get a good, accurate cut at whatever you put it at. Getting back to the actual fence, I did want also to have the track system on here. So I used that Amana track, T-track bit. So I first had to take it over to my dado stack and I cut this in the very center and I moved it out until I got it exactly just around a 5/16 in here. Just enough for my bit. Let me grab the bit. There it is. I wanted, this stem doesn't do any cutting. That's why you have to pre-cut your channel. All it gets cuts is the 2 T-slots underneath and makes the shoulder. So basically this is a dual rabbiting bit is what you would have to call it. But it has to have the clearance for the stem to go into here. In fact, once you cut this slot and you put this on your router, you can take this, tie your piece down, and you do not even need any kind of guide or anything. Your guide will be this here. Just when you put it in there and you hold it against one side and go the full length, and just to be safe, push it against the other side and go the full length with your bit, and you got it done. And like I said, that's all you really have to do. You can do it on the router table. I did this freehand. I thought that was an easier way to do it. It is a 1/2 inch shank on this bit, this Amana. I'll leave the number of this in the description so that if you want to refer back to it, you can. It's still out there, but it is a great tool to have around the shop. I've shown you how to make your own T-track. I could have made the T-track on here myself if I had wanted to. I decided I had the bit. This is the way I wanted to do it, and this is how I'm going to always do all my T-tracks in my shop. Whatever T-track I use anywhere. So, if you had the bit, great. If you don't, I just did a video recently about it, so where you can make your own. So you get to choose that. Now, as far as building this, I built this out of 2x4, cut it 2 pieces and put them together and glued it up to give me 2 pieces glued up to make the thing. It's less likely to move now because I have 2 pieces glued together. If you took 4 pieces of 3/4 inch stock, and I would just do this out of something inexpensive like pine, you really don't want this to be a hard wood because you want to be able to cut through this with ease if you happen to hit it for some reason. But you could also make this out of 4 pieces of 3/4 inch stock, 1x4s. and to get the same thing. That would probably even be better because now you have 4 boards that are glued together to help keep the other boards in check. And they help hold each other in place so that nothing moves. That's how you get something this large to be stable. So don't try to go with a 4x4 beam and just mill it down. That isn't going to work. So now that we have a good foundation and we put a T-slot on the 3 sides, you don't really need one on the bottom. And this thing is now ready to start using. So and to set it up, right now I'm going to set this thing up. So the first thing you want to do is bring it forward against your blade into your kerf. And I just gently hold it against that there. And now that I know that it's against the fence and it's against here flat, I snug these back down. And I'm ready to go. Now I take my safety block, my blade guard, and I put it on the back side here, and I'm now lined up because I'm using this miter slot that goes on this side of the miter gauge. Let's talk about this real quick for a second. All this is a piece of wood with a hole in it with a T-bolt that when this sets on the table, it can slide on there. It can move throughout the whole thing. I just made a plate like this. The distance from here, where the blade relief is, to here, and from here to here is based on the distance from your slot to your blade. So when I put it on this side, this stop block goes against it, and when I put it on from this side, this stop block goes against it. So it's really easy to make, and then after I did that, I then glued 3 pieces together to give me a big block. I did raise it up a little bit from the bottom so that it's not dragging. I didn't really want this to be dragging on the bottom, so any sawdust that is coming out of it will get out of the way. So this does right on the table, because when I tighten it down, it's usually just sitting there. That helps me make sure that I'm true and flat when I lock it down. And so you only need the 1 bolt to lock it down as a result. So, but it goes on in just seconds, which is what I really like about it. The easier it is to use, the more likely you are going to use it instead of leaving it on the shelf. So this is so easy to use that once I've got my blade in place, I'm ready to go, I'm done. What I really like about it is if I want to do a special cut with this, I can either put this on there for that special cut if I tip the blade or not. That'd be up to me. But I'm still not going to really go into this because of the stop up there that I use, the little dowel. That really makes a difference too, to help protect this from getting chewed up too quickly, because sooner or later you'll have to make it again. But it is pretty easy to make. It's just 1 block here. Now the only metal is my T-bolt that I have to use for the track. Everything else, and when I glued this in place, then I took some bamboo skewers and I just glued in 4 of those wood dowels in there. So, and that's just to add a little bit extra strength. So this thing will never come apart now. Good and solid, quick and easy to use, compact, and sets up in just a couple of seconds. So this is ready to go, ready for me to use. I have my stop block, and I just made it so that when it sets on here, it barely, this distance from here to here is a little less than the thickness of my fence. So no matter which T I put it on, I can mate it. So I can put this on in any kind of position. I can put it on this way if I want by reversing my T-bolt, so I can use it like a little fence. So this is actually pretty versatile, and I use this as my stop block for pretty much everything that I do. It would help if I get this set in there straight. Okay, so And this is, most of the time, this is all you're really going to need. And if I want to measure something, I just use my tape or my ruler or whatever. And I measure from my cursor. Now keep in mind, when I set this up and I pushed it up against the blade, right here on this side of the blade, right up on the edge, that is my 0 point. So if I put something in here to cut, and I have a line marked, and I line it up to this cursor, remember, everything on that side of the blade from where that cursor starts is what you're going to have. This side over here is going to be from where that cursor is minus the thickness of that blade. So if you want that to be accurate, I set this so my 0 is on that side of the blade. I could easily do it on this side of the blade in the same way, as I showed you when I set it up here. If I wanted the other side to be the 0, I could gently push it the other way. So you can adjust this to 0 out on either side of the blade in just a couple of seconds. So if I wanted to all of a sudden decide I want my off piece over here, I can set this over here, let this extend out, and I would readjust this by loosening it and bringing it up against, there we go, and then bring it up this side of the blade instead and snug it back down. And now I put my piece in here, and this is the piece I want to cut. Now I have all this room out here for the waist side, and I want this to be my precision cut is on that side of the blade. So this piece is going to be exactly what I want it to be when I get done with this cut. So you can 0 out quickly, and you can't do that on the table saw sled. So it's really nice that if you really want good, accurate cuts all the time, and you want to make sure, but yet you don't know which side of the blade you want to be able to cut on, you can change it with this type of setup. You can change which side of your blade is your 0. So that's another thing I like about using this over a table saw sled. I think that's pretty much everything I can think of about this, how to make it. My plans are making more of them. I'm also planning on taking this miter gauge, and I'm going to use this one instead of this one. This is the original one on the table. It weighs about twice as much as this thing, but it really feels so much beefier and it's better. And I'll tell you the truth, I like the way it feels and the way it sounds in my table saw versus this one. So I'm going to clean it up. This has everything that this one has on it except for these slots. I'll just have to drill. I do have to modify it. I'm going to drill 2 holes here so I can put my T-bolts in with my nuts back here, and the T-bolts won't be able to lift on and off. But I'll still be able to put this on by sliding my whole fence on and off. So it'll still be easy to take my fence and put it on and off on this. But make sure you pick a miter gauge that you really like. But if you end up you don't have what you like and you want to, you can change this out with this system. Change out what kind of miter gauge you use. So maybe you have more than one miter gauge in your shop. I could put a plate on any of them and then drill holes for the slots, T-bolts in the slots to line up. And I'd have the same thing and then leave this mounted permanently on any miter gauge that I'm happy with and that I want to use. So even if you have an unusual size table saw with the different size miter slot, there are some that are like 5/8 of an inch wide instead of 3/4. You can still use your original miter gauge with this fence system. So it's pretty versatile. You can use any miter gauge you want, and this is a good start. I will do a video about the Incra jig. I'm also going to do a dedicated video about using this on the table saw, and especially how this really makes this work a lot better to be able to use it on my table saw in all different ways. And I think this is probably seemed to be everybody's favorite, is I'm going to show you how to use this, and we're going to cut a 4-sided miter miter box, my 5-minute box. We're going to do one on here using this. And again, we won't have to do any measuring or anything if we don't want to. But if we want to, with the Inker, we'll be able to do as accurate as we want down to a 32nd of an inch. And we can do even more accurate using this to adjust down to the thousandths of an inch. So you can get as accurate as you want or make a cut as quick as you want using this table saw and using the miter gauge setup. So take your table saw off, hang it on the wall, get it out of the way. Make yourself one of these, get your miter gauge out, start using it. After a week or so, you're going to look back and you're going to say, I probably don't need that table saw anymore. That thing's so bulky, especially the big ones. But I do like the idea of making 2 or 3 different lengths of the same thing so that depending on what I'm doing, I can grab 1 or 2 or 3. The other thing, last thing I'm going to say about this is really wonderful for one other reason. If you look at how much money I have wrapped up here, this comes with your table saw. And if I look at all the hardware I'm using on all these accessories, this is probably this and then the Inker jig are the other 2 that might have some expense to them. But other than that, I probably got less than $20 wrapped up in all the accessories and everything. It is a very inexpensive way for you to set up your shop table saw and be able to get as good a cut and as accurate a cut every time as they get in a professional shop. This fence system really will help with that. So, now that you watched my hands all that time, I just want you to know that I think we're off to a good start. I'm at 3 more follow-ups on this miter gauge. So, any questions, any comments, any ideas? I'm always looking for new ideas, even about this or anything. Just leave them in the comments. I read them all. If you have a question, I virtually answer every question, usually a very short period of time. So, don't be afraid to ask me a question. If you like this video, you learned something here, hit that like button. Lets me know I'm doing the right thing. Most importantly though, please come back again because we're nowhere near done. Well, I'm almost out of coffee. I'm going to go get some. I bet by now you probably are too. Thanks. And we'll see you guys again very soon.